Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on the voice of progressive Minnesota, the largest progressive talk radio station in this part of the country. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, share the show, click that bell so that when we come on live, you'll be notified. But share the show. And we're also on Twitter at SanTitaJ, and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Like and share. I know there are other Santita Jackson pages, but this is the one you got to join. And I want you to be my friend. It's growing by the thousands, and I'm so grateful. But you all keep going to the other page, and they keep throwing you all off. So please go to Santita Jackson and Friends, everybody. It's a joy, 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 joy to be with you. There is so much going on, and while everyone has really been transfixed by the Trump trial in New York. In the meantime, we were talking about voting rights yesterday, New Bern, Alabama, where they've not had elections, Dr. Malveaux and Reverend Dr. Yuri and Jimmy Rothschild for decades. Indeed, a town that's 80% black, 20% white. The white elders of the town would not allow the black mayor to perform his duties. And most of the townsfolk didn't even know that they could have elections or were able to vote in 2024. But today, let's talk about, in the second hour, I guess the thread for this show today will be freedom of speech and our liberties. A lot of things that we have on paper, a lot of things that we take for granted, Dr. Malveaux and Reverend Dr. Yuri and Jimmy Rothschild, but we really shouldn't, particularly as we're slowly seeing these, or maybe we're not watching, but these rights are being withdrawn from us in the name of security. And Benjamin Franklin warned us about that. He said, if you don't protect these rights, you won't deserve them. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Increasingly, we will talk with Ed Yonka of the ACLU of Illinois about the measures that are being voted on as we speak by the Chicago City Council that are being implemented to prevent people from protesting in Chicago. You will not be able to get near the convention center at the United Center. You won't be able to get near there. But more and more places are being restricted. I'll talk about that in the second hour and what does that mean. But now let's talk about this young lady, valedictorian of her class at USC, one of the premier institutions, not just in this country, but in the world. Indeed, we've seen the scandal arise because so many wealthy people want their children to go to USC, but they can't get them in. Getting in is just that tough. But there's something else that's going on here. This young lady from modest means is the valedictorian of her class. Valedictorian of her class, Dr. Malveaux. I think we know something about that. And guess what? And you know, the valedictorian of your class in high school, college, you are called upon to give your commencement address. And what an honor that is. And can you imagine her family sitting in the audience waiting for this moment, waiting for this to happen? And then the university tells her, no, you may not do it, Muslim American, because it's too dangerous right now. What do you think about that, everybody? I want you to get engaged with the Santita Jackson Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, on YouTube, and on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and on Reverend Jesse Jackson's page. I share it there too. Dr. Malveaux, I want you to share it on your page. Reverend Dr. Yuri, Jimmy, if not now, I want everybody to share it because we need to have this conversation about this young lady and what is happening to her. Because I can only imagine, Dr. Malveaux, Reverend Dr. Yuri, Jimmy, when you are full of all of these hopes and dreams. I mean, and these honors at this point in your life mean everything to you. This is who you are. And she said, I am both shocked by this decision and profoundly disappointed that the university is succumbing to a campaign of hate meant to silence my voice. According to Common Dreams, she said, my own university has abandoned me. I can only imagine her heartbreak in a decision that the largest U.S. Muslim civil rights organization called cowardly. The USC announced Monday that it would not allow their Muslim valedictorian to speak at the commencement ceremony, citing safety concerns. Asna Tabassum, first generation South Asian Muslim, brown skinned woman, make no mistake about who she is, majors in biomedical engineering with a minor in resistance to genocide, they're not going to let her speak. Even though she is a prodigious student, excellent student, who's gotten better grades than anyone in her class. Jimmy Rothschild, I know you can't stay with us very, very long, but you and If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace and so many groups, Muslims for Palestine. I mean, you've been in coalition, quite frankly, with everybody. Rainbow Push. We've all been working together. What do you make of this decision not to let her
Yeah,
speak?
for sure. I mean, cowardice in the quote you just read is exactly right, Santita. These are the powers that be are afraid of anyone challenging the narrative, right? The narrative that those in power want us to be hearing, which is that there should be no criticism, no meaningful criticism of what is going on in Gaza. And there is, by the way, no evidence that Asna was planning to speak on this, right? This is targeting her based on her identity and based on content in a link that she shared one time. This is not speech that she has made herself. It is speech that is like associated 2 degrees out from her. But if your name is Asna and you wear a hijab and you're a Muslim young woman, then that speech reflects directly on you. You are immediately suspect and not to be trusted, right? And that's what this is about. Is they didn't feel like they could trust her to speak on the merits of her education, on the power of her education. And this is someone they educated on resistance to genocide. That is the school's name for her minor. And they were too afraid that she would even mention what they educated her to do. And they honored her for being successful in that education, right? So it is just pure cowardice that anyone might come close to challenging the status quo, that someone would use the tools that they educated this person to do to speak out about. And that is just based solely on her identity. It is cowardice. It is a shame. It is all of the above. But I'm interested in what the two doctors on here who are more academically accomplished than I am might have to say about it as well.
Well, they certainly are far more academically accomplished than I. But I guess one of the questions I have for you also, you're an organizer. That is what you do.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm saying, okay, maybe they're thinking about Hillary Clinton from Wellesley,
Mm-hmm.
more than 50 years ago when she embarrassed Senator Ed Brooke,
Right.
Dr. Malveaux, Reverend Dr. Geary, because she gave, what some deemed a politically charged speech at the time. And,
Yeah.
come on, that's what students do.
Exactly. And if that's their goal, to get to silence or to tamp down on potential political speech, they messed up, right? Because before this, would she have said something? Would she not? I don't know, right? Would there have been a demonstration at commencement? Would there not? I don't know, right? And I'm saying this without any knowledge of any plans that anyone was having, but like it seems to me that students might see what has happened, right? Students might see this attempt at censorship and respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're also giving her a platform, right? If they wanted to prevent her from speaking out, now they've made this a news story. Now they've lifted her up. So if she wants to say something now, she's going to be able to go on television, go on the radio, go online, and say what she was going to say, or even what she wasn't going to say, right? And speak out, speak her truth, speak to that resisting genocide that she was educated in, right? Use those skills that she obviously mastered as valedictorian, right? So I think if it was their goal to get there to be no disruption, to get there to be no challenging of the status quo at or surrounding this commencement, they really, really seriously miscalculated.
Well,
That's
what
what my
about
organizer brain is telling me.
Well, I mean, really, because I mean, my question is that. I mean, do you expect students to make their displeasure known? Their
We're,
disagreement.
having been a young person and working with young people, there is very, very little that young people like less than being told they can't do or say something, right? So if they are perceiving that they are that the school does not want certain things to be done or said, I think that the chances that folks will respond to that are very, very high.
Mm. Jimmy Rothschild, If Not Now Chicago. It's a tremendous group of young Jewish activists who are pro ceasefire. And let me just say, what does it, if not now, what do you do? Let people know.
Yeah, sure. I'll say, like, I'm not on staff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an organizer with If Not Now, with JVP Chicago, just as a member.
Mm-hmm.
And what both of those groups do in different ways, right, is to engage Jewish folks intergenerationally. Although we got a lot of young people excited right now, in work to dismantle apartheid, genocide, occupation in Israel and Palestine, right? And one thing that I appreciate that If Not Now does in particular, to answer that question, is trying to dismantle it, trying to use the lens of dismantling American Jewish support for apartheid and occupation and genocide,
Why
right?
is that important to you? I mean, how did you get here?
Yeah. Um, I think for me, something in my decade plus of organizing that has always motivated me, right? And I think this ties into this story with this young woman at USC too, is who gets to speak with authority on behalf of a group or a community, right? And for a very long time, the people who have been seen to be speaking with authority on behalf of the Jewish community are people with a very particular set of self-interests and set of politics around Palestine, right? And I think that through the work of JVP, through the work of If Not Now, through the work of young, autonomous uh, Jewish people across the political or across the generational spectrum, across the country, across the world, right? That common understanding, right? That the Jewish body politic has one perspective, right? Is starting to change, and I think that's important, right? That is so key in order to stop what's happening, right? Because we know that American political support, monetary support, military support for Israel is part of what is keeping this genocide going. And we know that even though a lot of the funding and political support comes from Christian Zionists, right? Like Christians United for Israel. The public, they are very good at operating behind the scenes. So the public perspective is we need to support Israel in order to get the Jewish vote, right? And in order to change that, there have to be loud voices that are saying this is not the single unifying position, right, of this community. And that is something by being very loud and very vocal, that If Not Now has been very successful at, that JVP has been very successful at building relationships with a broad coalition of organizers, of Black liberation organizers, of Palestinian organizers, right, working to create solidarity networks, to speak to and generate that political power that's going to actually make those changes. And I see the connection, right? Like USC is trying to say this is the only type of voice that can speak for us as an institution, as a university. And they saw the risk, they're not even the guarantee, the risk that a young woman would get up and say something that goes against what that voice is that they want to be seen as the voice of their institution, right? And that's why it's so important that young people like that speak out from whatever background, right, on these issues. And that's exactly what they were afraid of, and that's exactly what they gave her the platform to do by trying to shut her down. So I feel so much like hope and pride for this young woman. She's going to be able to go and speak her truth in all these. Like, I'm so angry at USC for doing this, but I'm also so excited to see what Asana is going to be able to do with this platform that they unintentionally gave her, by trying to shut her down.
I'm glad they did it because now we can see who they really are, Dr. Malvo, Jimmy, Reverend Dr. Todd. I mean, and let me just say this as we go to you, Dr. Malvo. Everyone in these social justice movements, Jimmy, started off as volunteers. Dr. King was a volunteer. I mean, when you're a soldier in the Freedom Army, you're a volunteer. No one's paying you. There is no money in this. If you want to be rich, this is not the space for you to be in. I mean, it's just not. And so, while I appreciate your saying, look, I'm just a member here, it's all these members who made it impossible for me to get through Grand Central Station that day. Impossible. It was like, wait a minute, what? And O'Hare, a lot of people missed flights. A lot of people were very upset. Golden Gate Bridge, New York, you got to bring out porta potties on the bridge because you shut these cities and main thoroughfares in America down. And it's all of you who together have done that. You don't do it alone. You don't do it alone. Dr. Malvo, you've been the president of one of the major universities of the world, Bennett College for Women. Indeed, they, along with North Carolina A&T, stood at the vanguard of the sit-in movement for students, and Fisk University. And of course, you've gone on to become really an icon of American descent, as an economist, really fighting for our rights in this economic and social and political and cultural space. And then you've taken that and parlayed that into becoming a university president. Talk to me. What, do, how does this happen? How is this decision made? Because you've seen the provost office, they're furiously sending me letters. This is what we've decided, and this is why we've decided it's a security threat. I would think then you put more security around her, Dr. Melville. I mean, something, right?
Well, this provost letter, Provost Guzman, I believe his name is, yes, Andrew Guzman, his letter reeks of cowardice, quite frankly, and for want of a better word, BS. There's a better word. The process of choosing a valedictorian, first of all, being a valedictorian is one of the highest honors. USC, they have both a valedictorian and a salutatorian, the number one and the number two person in their class. Now, in their case, anyone who had those top grades then had to submit a proposal to make a case for why they should be the speaker. They did not ask them to preview their speech. They did not ask for subject matter. They asked for their own case for their academic excellence. I'll say to you that in some schools, those folks have to give you a preview of their speech. Or at one college that I know of, the students were asked to send a video of their high points, not the whole speech. Case the faculty selected.
Okay. We lost you for a second. In a case that you know of, you send in the high points and not the speech itself.
Right. Your talking points, like 3 or 4 talking points,
mm-hmm.
and not the speech itself. But in this case, none of that was required. They ask you to make the case, I want to be the valedictorian because I have a 4.3 GPA and I've been involved in 200 applications for valedictorian and salutatorian. And there was a faculty committee that selected based on what people asked for. So the question, and they didn't ask for a preview. And who knows whether the young lady was going to talk about Gaza or not. I have to tell you, the valedictorian, you made me laugh when you asked me to come talk about this because I have a vivid memory at Bennett of 2 young ladies who both wanted to be the valedictorian. We did not have a salutatorian at the time, and they were in hot competition. Their GPAs were about 0.01 apart.
Oh, so 100.
3.2, 3.11 or 3.12. And these were the 4. Anyway, these sisters, they were rivals. They had been rivals since they got to campus. I mean, I thought they were going to throw down over. There were some issues about how this grade came and that came in, but the one who prevailed, who was the valedictorian, was very intense about it. And had we taken that away from she probably would have shut the campus down. She had people coming from South Africa to hear
Mm.
her. I mean, it's that big of an honor. Um, I tried to mediate this thing by saying, well, maybe we could have a salutatorian. We hadn't had one before. Bennett is a relatively small college. We have, on average, about 120 graduates any given year. So we didn't really need to. But I said, well, y'all so close. Maybe we can. That little girl told me, no, we've always had a valedictorian. I am number one and I am singular. My girl said it. I am singular and I want my honor by myself. And the board agreed with her, so she got her honor by herself. But that's how intensely students feel about this, most students. And so to take this away from this young lady, and she's first generation um, Muslim, wears a hijab. It's an amazing accomplishment, and it's amazing in terms of representation. So then and they told her she had it. So I know she went and told her mama them, told everybody, I mark your date, I'm going to be speaking. Then they come back and take it over safety. The safety is, the safety concern is BS. You can basically deal with safety. And so I think the provost blinked because he got a lot of pushback from, I'm sure, the Israeli students who have been very vocal in their support of Israel. And this young lady actually put a link on her Facebook page. I believe a link that connected to a debate about the Middle East, pro-Palestinian and a pro-Israeli. She put a link to a debate. What's that? That's giving out information. So for them to then say, you can't be, this is outrageous. I hope that somebody sues, because this whole notion, he says in his thing, this has nothing to do with freedom of speech. There's no free speech entitlement to speak at a commencement. The issue here is security and safety, period. Well, if there's no free speech entitlement, why did you open it up so 200 seniors apply to be the valedictorian or the salutatorian? Why did you do that? If you had, in my undergrad, actually, I was not the valedictorian because we all had to send what we were going to send. And I sent what I was going to say. I was stupid. I shouldn't have sent what I was going to say. What I was going to say, y'all know, probably didn't pass somebody's smell test. I wanted to talk about the flaws in Jesuit education while graduating from a Jesuit
school, of course.
But hey, you can't make chicken salad.
Well, now there you go. See, look at the Lord, Reverend Dr. Yuri. Just stop Dr. Malvo before she could say something. Look at God. Look at God.
I don't know if that was God. I think that was some evil Jesuits who didn't want to hear it. But anyway, and people squirm during commencement speeches depending on who you get. Some students will give you the sweetness light rap. Some valedictorian tore the university up. I mean, tore it up. Talk about the racism, the flaws. Ooh, but they're 20, 21, 22 mostly. Some are, they're speaking their truth. They were taught to speak their truth at their university. I find this outrageous. And the faculty who selected her should also be outraged. This was a faculty choice. So you could apply, and then once you applied and you put in your paperwork, a faculty committee selected them. So what is wrong with the judgment of that faculty committee? They should be asking the president and the provost, why did you pick us if we could make a choice? Why did you pick us if you were going to censor this young woman? And they didn't know what she was going to say. That's the other part of it. She could have done a laudatory talk about the role of Muslim students in our country. We don't know what she was going to say. They chose to take that honor from her based on her identity, based on the fact that she's Muslim. She's probably going to say something that disrespects Israel. Well, how do you know? And so they didn't give her a fair chance at anything. It's an outrageous situation. I feel very badly for her. And as she said in her own words, my university has abandoned me.
Oh,
It's very poignant. They have abandoned me. And so I just think, I think it's a horrible situation. This provost is a wuss. I mean, he's just a wuss. In his comment, he says, well, some schools don't have one um, valedictorian. And that is true. Many will have more than one. They may do a little diversity thing. So they have, you know, various constituencies. But he says in his statement, we're going to figure out another way to lift them up, another way besides graduation. So, you know, what do you, it to me, it leaves me almost speechless. I can't imagine it. And I really can't imagine how devastated this young lady and her family must feel, especially after she got a letter that said, you're the one, you got it. And then they take it away. That's unconscionable.
hmm. Reverend Dr. Urick.
Well, let's be clear on what we're hearing. She's been disinvited to speak as the one who has been selected as the valedictorian because of a safety threat.
And wait, hold on. Before you go any further, you are not only a lawyer, but you are a preacher. So I know you are judicious in the use of your words. You said she was disinvited.
She was disinvited. She's still the valedictorian. She just can't talk at the commencement.
And they have
So
withdrawn the invitation for
they've
which you.
withdrawn the invitation out of fear of safety. So let's log. Let me
And
let me
has
put
there
on
been,
the.
Todd, just forgive my interruption, but has there actually been a safety threat? There has
Well,
been no
let me walk
impact.
through that. Let me walk
Okay.
through it. Right. So if they're saying there's a safety threat, let's just kind of look at it. Right. So as a defense attorney, the first thing I'm looking at is what is the accusation? And is the accusation uh, supported by any credible information that would say that her speech presents a safety threat? They're saying the potential response to what might be her speech leads to a safety threat. And instead of addressing the threat, they are stifling the speech, which they don't know what she's going to say yet. So that's number one. That argument is folly. It opens them up to a whole lot of litigation. So unless they're saying that this student's conversation leads to some form of incitement, and they've got evidence of that, obviously this evidence would have emerged since she was selected to be valedictorian. Otherwise, she wouldn't be the valedictorian. So let's just throw that out. And since I heard Dr. Malveaux talk about chicken salad, you can't make it out of chicken dung. Dung, Santita, dung. It's you said I'm a preacher. I'm gonna use the Bible's word.
Thank you.
So
Oh,
here's the problem with this whole response. Number one, we say we have a threat unless you're assigning the threat to her potential incitement, then the threat is coming from another source that's not her. And so unless you're saying you're dealing with the threat because you're trying to protect her from somebody that may be trying to harm her, that should not stifle her speech. So number one, let's throw that out the window. I see litigation beginning to open up. Then they say, well, you're not entitled to speak at commencement. Well, there are three things actually. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, Article 1 of the California Constitution, particularly Section 2, which subparagraph A says every person may freely speak, write, and publish his or her sentiments on all subjects, being responsible for the abuse of this right. A law may not restrain or abridge liberty or speech or press. Now, to publish means more than just kind of put it on paper and distribute it. It means I can speak it, I can enact it, I can communicate it by whatever means might be reasonable and accessible. And so if every person may freely speak, full stop, let's just stop there. And you are saying she cannot freely speak because of some threat that does not emanate from her, but is allegedly going to be a response to her, that ain't her problem. That is your campus police department's problem to make sure that everybody's safe, because you don't know what any speaker at commencement may or may not say about anything. So unless you're going to censor every statement by everybody, including the president, including deans, unless you're going to do that, you're going to have a problem. So you've opened up the door. There's a clear distinction. She's being stifled under the state and federal constitutions. We now have, proverbially, as Houston would say, a problem. Now, here's the deeper issue that USC has to wrestle with. She's graduating with her degree in, I think, some form of biology and a minor
biomedical engineering
and a minor in, quote, resistance to genocide, end quote. Now, this minor, she did not create for herself. It had to be achieved under the rules of the university to take a certain number of courses to be able to declare a minor, and those courses have to be argued or offered or made possible through the curriculum of the university, unless you did it with all independent studies. And even when I was on faculty at every university that I've worked at, we've never had the fulfillment of a minor requirement through all independent studies. So something in this minor has courses attached to it that this student has taken. And so now she is going to tap into the reservoir of what has been given to her through the instructional process of this university. And she's going to put it on public display as the one who's done the work and been selected, which I find, you selected a valedictorian. Usually the valedictorian, to Dr. Malveau's point, was usually a calculation. And the selection only becomes a selection if the calculation brings you to within basically a margin of error that is so minimal that they basically have the same GPA. So she's done the work, she's made the grades, she's taken the classes, and now she's earned the right to be able to speak and has a constitutional right to speak publicly. The question now becomes, if she does not have the right to speak at the commencement, then I would suggest to the valedictorian and her classmates, let's have a press conference before commencement.
Yes.
At the venue. And I'm going to say what I have the right to say within the bounds, as long as I'm not inciting anything. I can say whatever I want to, and then let the president decide. And even further than that, if once we have had that statement, I would then invite my classmates to say, all right, let's boycott commencement.
And they ain't gonna do that.
I'm saying they're not going to do it, but I'm just saying if the issue is an issue and the issue is worth addressing, and you're going to do what Barbara Mikulski told me and some other preachers when we met with her some years ago in her Senate office, stop having a conversation talking about you speaking truth to power. Tell somebody you're speaking truth to power about power because you bring power. So how did the students use their power to have a conversation of speaking truth to power without having to be co-opted into participating in the charade of commencement that is only going to endorse certain points of view from certain students? So now what you have is a violation of speech on the basis of it could be her religion, it could be her ethnicity, it could be a number of things. The university is ripe for a lawsuit. And unless they can draw a nexus to a safety threat that she presents, if somebody else presents a safety threat to me, that should not tell me that I can't speak. It means you better do something to keep me safe. Because, oh, by the way, we also have an implication of Title IX.
But sue them for what? What kind of damages? It's a private school. Can't they do what they want to do, even if they get federal funding?
No, because they get federal funding, you don't get to just do what you want to.
Okay.
So in order to accept the money, you accept federal money with the understanding that you shall not discriminate on any basis in the provision of any program or services in exchange for getting federal money. So that's Title VI. So we have a Title VI implication. Do you want to get the governor, Gavin Newsom, involved to have to decide whether or not he wants to wrestle with who is serving within the system, right? The university, USC. I thought that meant University of Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
Is it part of the University of System, Dr.
No,
Malva?
no,
No,
it's a
Private.
not
private
UCLA.
standing.
It's USC. Right.
So in private, so now the same rules apply. If you're taking federal money, if you are financial aid, student loans,
Mm-hmm.
any of those things, you run the risk of losing access to that if discrimination is proven. And so I think it's still the same basis, even though they have because they're not claiming private, quote, religious issues where now you have a different kind of entanglement. They just threw some arbitrary thing out there to say we don't want her to speak. And so the way we're going to keep her from speaking about something that we really don't want to talk about in this setting, because if I look at who the largest benefactors are to the private university, there's probably some interest tied to some check somewhere that says if you allow this person to speak, I'm going to do as we saw at Harvard with President Gay. I'm going to threaten to take back my money, which is going to not only the support of your programs, but also your endowment. So it's all of that kind of playing at the same time when we kind of look at where is this analysis. But unless you can say that you know that her speech is intended and likely to incite something that presents a safety thing, like a safety risk, like yelling fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire present, right? That's the whole issue. Then you're going to have a free speech issue, and it's going to be a speech issue that's going to go all the way up. If it doesn't get resolved, if they want to challenge it going all the way to the Supremes, it's going to go up. And I think likely that even this conservative Supreme Court would come down on the side that simply because you don't like the message does not mean you get to manage the speaker. It's like going to church and deciding that because you didn't like what the pastor preached, you somehow are now going to tell him he can't be the pastor no more. Good luck with that one.
Dr. Malvo, what is this saying about what's happening on America's college campuses? Because we're seeing the pro-Palestinian voices, Jimmy Rothschild and Reverend Dr. Todd Geary and Dr. Malvo. We're seeing them pay a high price. Black and Palestinian students are really paying a price at Harvard and all of the schools, and they are really for their principal position on ceasefire and on Palestinian justice while calling for Israeli security. I think it's important. They are it's very hard for them. And then you have a group of Jewish students who feel like they're under siege. I think they're not accustomed to being disagreed with. And then some of them, because of how they were raised, and I can appreciate this, it's as if the Holocaust happened to them. But I can appreciate that. The closest I got to slavery or Jim Crow was when my grandmother Helen, my father's mother, who you knew, Dr. Malvo.
Yes.
She reacted very strongly when I was so excited about Roots 2. We had some advanced tapes like 6 months before it came on TV. And I was so excited, Dr. Malvo and Reverend Geary and Jimmy Rothschild. This is the biggest television show in the history of American TV. So we got these advanced copies, and I was like, this is going to be so great. I couldn't even get it out, Dr. Malvo, Reverend Geary, Jimmy Rothschild. She was so angry. She said, do you know why we look as we do? Do you think I want to be reminded? Don't you ever mention Roots to me again. Don't mention it. Don't discuss that with Mama Helen. Don't ever do that. So I can understand people who are in fear, wherever they are in their spaces. But when I look at this, look at this young lady, when I hear her say that my university has abandoned me,
yes,
I see the American dream just crumbled. I see something.
she's been very mistreated. She's been extremely mistreated, and it's all on the premise that all Palestinians are anti-Israel. It's also on the premise that if you say anything that's even
And everyone, Dr. Malvo is in the United States Virgin Islands. So we're getting her, excuse me, through an ocean. Pardon me. So we're very excited that she's with us today. But you were saying that if anyone says anything that's mildly critical, Dr.
mildly
Malvo.
critical, suddenly you're anti-Semitic. I mean, I told you before about a piece. It wasn't even a piece. I reacted to the October 7th Hamas wasn't strong. It's just I'm just wondering why this happened. Let's look at it. I got Jewish friends who one man told me he was in tears. Another I have yet to speak to since October 7th. He said he just doesn't want to be bothered with me because I'm anti-Semitic. Now, what did I say that was anti-Semitic? See, many people take criticism with Israel with anti-Semitism, and they're not the same thing. There are many Jewish people. There are many but people are afraid. And I'm going to tell you why they're afraid, Santita. APAC, the American Israel Political Action Committee, has been purchasing dissent. They've raised a couple million to go against Jamal Bowman. They've
No,
raised
$100 million fund, Dr. Malvo.
exactly. Summer Lee, bless her, has raised a million.
Oof. Can you imagine $100 million? They offered Hill Harper $20 million in Michigan.
Yeah.
To,
No, but so
you
this
know,
money,
oh, boy.
what we're ignoring is the extent to which APAC is an influencer that shapes opinion. So in shaping opinion, what these young Jewish people are hearing is if they're critical of Israel,
Okay, somebody's typing.
$3 billion, 3.3 actually, for so-called defense, which I call offense. They're using weapons that we manufactured and paid for to attack these people. And all of this is great public debate.
Well, hold that thought, Dr. Malvo. Jimmy Rothschild, are you here? I heard Jimmy's baby. He's a new father. Heard his baby in the back.
Okay.
So he's papa sitting today. So
He's not papa sitting, he's taking care of his children. And you shouldn't say sitting when you're dealing with your own children.
That's right. Well, now he's walking. Jimmy? Okay, you're gonna have to come off mute. Jimmy? Okay. Well, okay, I got you now. Oh yeah, we got you.
Can y'all hear me?
Absolutely.
I hear you now,
No?
yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold up. Let me try something. Hold up.
But to your point, Dr. Malvo, you were finishing that as we.
Is that better?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Jimmy, I've
Let's
got
see.
about.
Let's see.
Well, let me just finish the point,
Okay, of
Santita,
course.
which is simply that this debate is being it's a hot debate in public.
Well, you know what? As we're getting all of these hiccups worked out, Reverend Dr. Yuri, I mean, what do you think is going to happen now? Because now it seems like the genie is out the bottle. A lot of things that you couldn't say before, you absolutely have to. You do say it now. Now people are no longer conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, at least not the way they were before.
So I can't really say what may or may not happen. I think I can opine in terms of what should happen. And it really depends on which role you play in this whole conversation about this young woman's valedictory speech.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like there's been no communication about just asking for, can you give us a general idea of what you're going to speak about?
Mhm.
Right? You can actually work that out and come to an agreement that you could still kind of speak to the issues, but avoid using words that might trigger a response. Right? The other thing is whether or not this is really the president's own independent decision, or is he getting pressure from someone still within the institutional structure, but likely donors um, who give annual money? I started looking very quickly when you briefly heard me kind of typing to see if I could find current money on current numbers or current names on the largest contributors to USC. The numbers I saw from not quite 9 years ago. I think Steven Spielberg was the largest individual contributor at that point. So when we start looking at who's there, who has interest around what may or may not be said at this commencement, and when we start looking at that, a la what we often talk about, having learned from our time watching Reverend do his work with Rainbow Push, is to understand that the person, even who's making the decision, is reporting to somebody who's on the board, who's connected to folks on the board, what corporations have interests, are the members of the board serving on other boards for which there might be compensation, and if there's a conversation that goes awry, is there this somehow ripple effect that could adversely affect certain interests? And so since she is the student, and her great reward for her academic excellence and prowess is you get to come to commencement, and if you're nice and say what we want you to say, we'll let you talk. But that's really what it is. The question is, if does the school understand that first, that's not the only place that she can talk. And if you don't want her to talk in this venue, let's find an alternative venue to raise the issue, and then allow you to come on behalf of the university, and let's have this conversation in a forum that you cannot control, but it forces you to then have to validate the position that you've taken, and you have to now bring evidence. And so it doesn't have to be a tug of war. All right, fine. You don't want her to speak at the commencement. Well, she doesn't have to speak during the commencement program, but I would surely make sure she could speak, and make sure that there would be cameras at the time they're lining up to be able to process in. And since she is the valedictorian, it's highly likely that she's going to be first amongst the class right after the president and the faculty and the board march in, and just let her make, well, and she didn't not even need to get permission. Just take the moment and make the statement. And if there's some pushback on it, then it becomes documented as a factual support for the assertion that the university is intentionally stifling speech. And then let them decide, you can protect your donors, and then you can pay your outside lawyers to be able to defend it, because they're going to be litigation repercussions for such a decision. And it may actually fuel other speeches from folks who, as my mama would say, don't use ain't, but who ain't the valedictorian, who gonna start talking too. So let's have a group conversation.
From the audience, Jimmy Rothschild.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
2 minutes before we go. And then you Malco. Jimmy?
Yeah. So I wanted to say something about Santita, what you had mentioned earlier around fear and sort of how it motivates us, right? I think that as Jewish folks, we're responding to our trauma and the real threat of anti-Semitism, and we have choices about how we respond, right? I think there are some people who have that trauma and respond with isolation, with a feeling of the need to turn inward and protect ourselves, maybe to turn to state power, to have the police protect us, and to use that trauma as a way to harm or to tear others down. And I think there's an alternative, and there's a growing alternative of seeing the path to Jewish safety and the lessons of our own persecution and genocide as a call to stand in solidarity with other communities, right? And I think that's the work that I see so many more Jewish people across the country, across, ethnic backgrounds within the Jewish community, across age, across the nation, turning more and more to. And I think that's the response here, right? Is how do we take, we have this history of trauma, and something is triggering that in the current environment. How do we take that and then build something positive and generative, and powerful to stand up to sort of the white supremacy that targets all marginalized people, right? And so I appreciate, Santita, that you brought up that fear, and I think there's like an alternative response that I'm seeing more and more of, and I think that's the answer here.
Absolutely. And I just think, Dr. Malvo, it's important to speak to that because I have to try, or should I say, I really try to hear everybody.
Of course.
Wherever it is that I land, I at least want to try to understand you because there's something, because, truth is neutral. There's not my truth, your truth, his truth. It's true. There's an
Absolutely.
experience you have. It's just a lived experience.
Exactly.
Let's put it all in the pot and let's figure it out.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
thank you so much for having me on, Santita. I do have to run, but I'd love to come on again soon.
Absolutely, my love to the baby.
All right, thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.
The new generation. Dr. Malvo, these last 2 minutes belong to you. Well, actually 90 seconds. Boom.
Again, what's happened to this young woman is outlandish, but it's also a function, as you asked earlier, about the campus climate now. Everyone has to be politically correct. If you're speaking outside the script, that people are being stifled. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is being stifled. Of course, the whole varying positions around the Gaza and Israel war are being stifled. No one denies Israel's right to exist, but exists on what terms, under what conditions, and who is oppressed because of their existence. Let's not forget that this was Palestinian land that was given to Israel. Let's not forget that. I mean, you talk about history, and I have to tell you, Santita, when you talk about people who are the descendants of Holocaust survivors, we empathize with them. We feel their pain. But we are the descendants of enslaved people. We have, we're not going to do who's the most pitiful competition. What we're going to say is that the sympathy that African American legislators have for Gazans is because we also know how it is to be treated poorly. So Jamal Bowman, to Liba Rashid, they all deserve medals of honor, not AIPAC going after them. And one of the things I think this not a subject for this conversation, but for a later one. What about AIPAC? Where does their money come from? It comes from Jewish millionaires, and billionaires, whose interests may be less Israel than maintaining systems of predatory capitalism that are worldwide oppressors.
Mm-hmm. And really, that is it. We've had that conversation before here, and we can have it again because really, these are right wingers who are oppressors. Period. And I think it's important for us to remember, to understand that you have freedom fighters and people who fight for liberation of every religion, of every conceivable background, and I am in league with them. Even as I look at my brothers and sisters who fight for something else, I certainly believe that every human being God chose and God is lifted up. I don't think God loves anybody more than another person. I think that God loves us all, and we need to figure out how to live together. And Asna, God bless you.
Yes.
And you know what? This is just the beginning for you. I don't know what blessing God has for you in this, but be very clear, young lady, there is a blessing in this for you because you cannot be defined by USC. I hope you now know that you're bigger than that. You're bigger than that. Oh, you're big. Come on out in the world. We welcome you. Stay tuned for the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show as we talk about the places where you cannot increasingly go to protest during the Democratic Convention. Yeah, the Democratic Convention. They are shutting down protests in Chicago, everybody. We got to talk about it. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio in just a few minutes.